Hello, hello, hello. I'm gonna twist my hair today. Um, but we're not here to talk about my hair. Of course, I'm gonna talk about my hair because I'm a girl. Hello, okay, I'm gonna add you in. Let's add her in, y'all. And we're just gonna get right into it. I was gonna do it, but I might as well have her on here as we do it. Today we're going to be talking about the dope history of colored Carnegie Library. And
Hello.
hello. So look, what I love most about my lives is that most time people don't get on. And so I do my thing, and then the idea is that they'll watch it later, and that kind of gives me ease in the live moment. And they'll see me saying this because I'm live, but who cares? Um, hello.
Absolutely.
Can you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do. Yeah, just introduce yourself.
All the things. My name is Alicia Costello. In my day job, I work for the Texas Historical Commission, doing the marker program. Yay, markers. So those aluminum markers you see on the side of the road, that's us. And when 5 o'clock comes, I don't stop thinking about history. And the Colored Carnegie Library Project was really a product of that. And so, yeah, I'm also for the past year and a half now been researching the Colored Carnegie Library in Houston, and became a little bit of a passion project for me. So, yeah, that's why I'm here.
So awesome. Yeah, I want to speak to that. So last year I saw Alicia at the Black Houston's seminar conference, something of that sort. In her presentation, like, just stuck with me from that day. And oftentimes over months when I'm trying to research, I'm just like, I can't find the information that she was giving. Like I see it, but you just went so deep into it. I'm like, I want that information at hand. People should know this information. So I've, DM'd you a couple times like, hey, like, how can we find this information? Or can you share it again? Or will you be speaking on it again? Because it was just so important, so amazing, so dope. Your presentation, and then I think like the Sugarland Plantations presentations were the top two. They just really stuck with me. And I'm like, this needs to be once a year, twice a year, talked about. Again, when I go in and when I try to do research on the Color Carnegie Library, you get the base of like, yeah, this existed, now it's gone. Like,
Yeah.
okay, but you went into like who was involved, what it was to the community. You talked about the architecture and who built it, drew it, all of the great grand things. So yeah, we're here to talk more. I want you to dive deeper into that. So I wrote some questions here. So of course, let's start off with who were some important historical figures that were the integral part of the Colored Carnegie Library, or what is the Colored Carnegie Library? Because people are like, girl, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So libraries are a weird thing. We got them because several factors kind of hit a flash in the pan at the same time. So if you think about like literacy, we don't really have public schools teaching students to read in Texas until about the 1880s. It was really the Freedmen's Bureau who widespread started the idea that we should be educating every child. So that was not even like it was a priority of the Texas legislature, but they didn't put any money behind it, and they really couldn't figure out like a way to get it started. And after they saw what the Freedmen's Bureau was doing in Reconstruction, Texas, they were like, oh, okay, now we see how to make this a possibility, make this happen. So they go around and they start all of these public schools. So they're teaching all these students to read. Like finally, more than like 10% or 15% of people are literate. So before that, you had like the people who were literate, they were kind of hanging around, like they were doing their thing, and maybe they would trade books, like, off the cuff, right? They would like trade with their friends. They had maybe a little like society, but they really wasn't widespread. In addition to all of that, you have a bunch of people moving to cities,
Okay.
right? So you have like the de-escalation of agrarian culture, right? So you have a bunch of people moving to cities, and all of a sudden you have all these taxpayers in one place and they can read, and these libraries start forming. Okay, so these public libraries as we know them. But they're really kind of not widespread enough because no one is making enough in tax dollars to
Yeah.
like produce these things. So Carnegie comes around, Andrew Carnegie, and he starts creating, yeah. He was like, I feel bad for making billions of dollars in like fairly unethical ways. So I'm going to put my name on libraries instead. And he had personally benefited from public
Uh-huh.
libraries. So from like the original public library. So he was like, I'm going to go create these in towns all across America. And I think something like 1,600 libraries he actually
Wow.
funded. Excuse me. And there was like a system to the Carnegie Library.
Hmm.
Okay. So the system was that you had to get local
Hmm.
involvement in order to buy the land. So he was not going to buy the land for you. You had to show local involvement by raising the money to get the land. You had to get the city to promise to pay 10% of whatever his gift was in upkeep yearly. So you had to get city involvement, you had to get local involvement, and then he would fund the money for the building itself. So he was going to put down that initial investment to build the thing, but it was up to the city to maintain it, and it was up to the people to buy the land. So he is probably the start of just the library system that made it possible for this thing to happen, right? So Houston gets their Carnegie Library in 1904.
The I
And yeah, go ahead.
the Julia Iton Library, is that the Carnegie Library or no?
So no, that is not the Carnegie Library. The place, of course, where the Carnegie Library now is a parking lot. It's a parking garage, but yeah. So but that one is different. That one's built in
Okay.
1926. So
Okay.
they built one, but it was pretty small, this Carnegie Library. And so pretty soon they outgrew it. I think it really only functioned for 15 years before they built the what's now the Julia Idison building.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, so kind of unfortunate for them, right? They got this beautiful Carnegie Library, and if you look up pictures of the original, it's gorgeous, but it's really small. So they get $50,000 to build this library, this Carnegie Library. It's beautiful, it's great. And in 1909, there's two kind of stories to how this plays out, and I'm not really sure which one is true. So I'm just going to give you both of them,
Yes.
okay? And it's kind of like I can see how both of them could be true. Like I could see how people could have read into one to make the other, but I also see how one could have been suppressed and the other one was like the approved version. One, the story A is that Professor E.O. Smith, who was the president of Hollywood School, I think it was an elementary, he decided that he was going to, like, the story A is that he and a group of Black educators tried to use the library and were turned away, okay, because of their race. They said, like, this has never been tried. We don't know about this. We're going to refer you to our trustees, okay, to see if we can even, like, serve you. And, and the story goes that after waiting around for a year, nothing happens. Like, nobody would answer their phone, essentially. And so they just decided, like, forget this. We're going to start our own library. Like, clearly they're not going to be, helping us. So that's story
Okay.
A. Story B is that they just decided to do it. They just decided, like, they're not gonna, there was no inciting incident where they tried, Story B was just like, they're not gonna do it. This is like rising Jim Crow, Houston, Texas. And so we're just going to ourselves start this library, right? I don't know which is true. Um,
Like you said, both can be true kind of at the same time.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, did they go with story B because like no one was trying to hear story A? Or is story A us reading back
Yeah.
into right? What really happened in the history? Don't know. So those are the two stories about how it happened. So E.O. Smith got this group of educators together. So some early educators were W.L.D. Johnson. He was a long-time educator and principal. R.G. Lockett. There's a bunch of names. Let's see. I'm not sure if I'm going to remember all of them off the
What
top of my head. But E.O. Smith is like the
was
big one.
E.O. Smith an educator in Houston
Yeah,
or
yeah.
okay,
So these are all Houston
okay,
educators. Yeah.
okay,
And they're all generally like this is 1909, 1908. They're all generally in the fourth ward.
okay, so they were part of the Freemanstown community.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. So later, some of their schools move around as Houston expands. So if you look up, for example, like what became Hollywood School now, it's like in a different neighborhood, and that's because it moved later
okay.
as the Black community expanded.
I've never
Um,
even Hollywood school. I'm like Hollywood. That's why it's like, is this
right. And so some of them were like, I think one of them was like a teacher at the colored high school, which would eventually become Sam Houston. It didn't go through that name change quite yet at this time. So you had just like regular teachers, you had some principals, like all in this together.
okay?
Um, so then they they start to try like they want a Carnegie library, like that's their ultimate goal from the start, right? So they know they have to try to get buy-in from the community. So where do they go? They go, of course, the institutions, right? They already have the education kind of down, but
Mhm.
they go to Julia Idison,
Okay.
who's the librarian. They say, hey, if we do this, like, would you be in? She's like, absolutely, I'm in. Um, they go to like FL
Mhm.
Lights, who's a pastor.
At,
He's in.
he was the pastor at Antioch, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think at that time, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
They're going to all of these different churches to see, like, are you going to buy in? They're going to different leaders, like community leaders in the area, and they get buy-in, right? So they're like, people are for this. Um, so yeah, that's when they start to say, okay, like let's get the library running and the library started, and then we'll worry about a permanent building. So
Okay.
in 1909, they start um, a they start the library with Julia Idison's like help in a room of the colored high school. So 1909, they are an operating like branch. Okay, so they buy some books. Julia Idison gives them a bunch of duplicates from the White Library, and she kind of teaches them how do you catalog these things, right? She kind of gives them a 1 day seminar and like this is what you do. And she's like, go forth and do. So they do. So it's operating, this library is like operating out of a room, which is essentially the study hall room of the colored high school. So if you can imagine like a school library like we would have
Right.
today, but that is the public library for this community.
Wow.
So that's kind of the start. That's the impetus. Now, E.O. Smith realizes, you know, I need more help and more people if I'm going to then buy a piece of land, get the city buy-in, etc. So the other main person he brings in is J.B. Bell. J.B.
Okay.
Bell's prominent real estate agent. I've seen places say he was the richest Black man in Houston at the time. Um,
He was a businessman
he was
or
a
real
real estate agent.
estate?
Yeah. So that would be helpful if you're trying to buy land, right? That
Right.
you bring in
Let me
a
look.
real estate agent with deep pockets.
Right.
You got to get
And-
the deep pockets in there. So he brings in several others. So he takes his like trustee board from 5 to 9.
okay.
So he brings in extra people. He brings in a guy who was a clerk in the court system, so he can have access to lawyers and legal advice. He brings in, just folks like that. He's like, okay, what industries do I now need? And then
Yeah.
let me bring in representatives from those, right?
Okay. Okay.
So they buy land in 1911. So like if you look at a map from the old Fourth Ward, there's like this piece that's no longer there in the east that juts into like where downtown is now, right? And it was platted totally different. Like the roads do different roads.
Right.
None of those roads are there anymore. And the colored high school is like sort of at the far end, at the far east end. Directly south, one block, they buy a plot of
Okay.
land. So it's essentially like right next to where their current branch is.
Right. Room. Okay.
Sorry, trying to get over this cold. Everyone is sick.
Oh yeah.
Um, so yeah, so they buy this plot of land, and they raise funds. They're doing fish fries. I've read that people were like giving bayou tours up and down the bayou to like raise money. Like it was an all-in kind of situation. All the kids in all the different schools are doing
Okay.
fundraising. So they have like contests to see like which school can raise the most money to get this library.
Wow.
Um, and so they have a big buy-in from like the community. And then I think they can only raise something like $600 of the like 1,500 they need. So that's a lot of money back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And so JB Bell steps in with the
The
rest.
real estate.
So yeah, those deep pockets really came in handy for them. Really were nice. And so he eventually, like, that's a loan and they're going to pay him back. But so he steps in, he does that for them. And then they make an application to the Carnegie system. But they want, how do I say, they want friends to go with their application,
Okay.
right? So, so they call up Emmett Scott. Emmett Scott, Fourth Ward native, who is at this time, this is 1911, at this time, he is Booker T. Washington's secretary, confidant, sometimes PR
Okay.
representative. Like
Right. Right hand.
he's right hand man. Yeah. So Booker T. Washington knows Andrew Carnegie very well. Obviously, they're like elites.
Right.
So, so he's like, hey, hi, can you put in a good word for our application with Carnegie? So there's like all of these letters back and forth about like, hey, we love this application. You should put this at the top of your stack, like all this stuff. And then Carnegie actually also knows JB Bell. So
Okay.
there are connections. There are connections there. JB Bell knows both Carnegie has met Carnegie, but knows Booker T. Washington like fairly well. So there's lots of pictures of them together. Like anytime you have a picture of Booker T. Washington like in Texas, JB Bell's probably somewhere in the picture as well. So so yeah, that's their kind of they're connecting with these national figures, right? Which is so cool because you have like these local folks,
Yeah.
the principals of your local school, like how more local can you get? And then you have these great national figures that we have. But
Connected.
then we're going to bring in, yeah, then we're going to bring in one more though.
Okay.
So their application's accepted, super excited. But now they need someone to design the building, right?
Yes.
And I should mention that Andrew Carnegie had only begun to grant Carnegie Library grants for Black communities. So this is actually, and all of them had been successful with Booker T. Washington's
Okay.
help up to the point. So the first one for a Black community in the country was
Okay.
Tuskegee. And then that was in like 1901. And
That's
then yeah, there was a
right.
reason, they reached out to Washington. And then you had one at Wiley College in 1904. That was the
Okay.
first one in Texas. It's still standing. It's their admin building, which is cool.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a historical marker there?
I believe so. It doesn't, I think it says maybe something about the library, or it used to be the Carnegie Library. I don't think it says anything about it's the first one in Texas,
Okay.
but it
Okay.
is the first because I don't think anyone, this is the cool thing about local history. I don't think anyone had done the
Yeah.
research, you know? So I don't think anyone knew to put on the marker that this was the first Texas one. Um, so yeah, so that, and then there had like been one or two, okay, that were helping Black
Okay.
communities. But this was really kind of, this was kind of it.
Wow.
So yeah, so then they, to hire, this was the cool thing, to hire an architect. I don't know who made the comment, but they hired William Sidney Pittman, who's Booker T. Washington's son-in-law,
Wow.
to design the building. It was, I believe, from what I can tell, the first Black architect to design a colored Carnegie
Yeah.
library.
I remember you saying and that was amazing.
Um, William Sidney Pittman is absolutely a character. He's the best. I love him. He is a messy, like he would have the best TikTok because he is messy in the best way. And he's just one of those follows that you follow because you're like, I just need to know what he says next.
Right. Okay. Is it giving kind
Um,
of vibes or like
huh.
somebody of that, like, oh, you're just interesting.
He's
But
just
at the
like
appreciate your artistry.
exactly. It's kind of Kanye, but without the like the really bad parts of Kanye because you're like, I just wonder what he says next,
Right.
right? But like then Kanye gets really problematic, and I don't know. I wasn't there, but like I don't know if Pittman ever got super problematic like that. But he made later in his life, he made a lot of enemies.
Oh.
Okay, we'll just say it that way. He was not. He was like no one's dinner party guest, and people were like, "Yay!" They were more like, "Oh, you brought that guy." Okay. Um, so Pittman is picked to like design this building, right? And so yeah, they build it. It is they call it buff brick. It's like the light brown brick that you see. This is Pittman's first Texas
Okay.
building. So he would go on to be like the first practicing Black architect in Texas. He was born, I think, in like Washington D.C. kind of area. So he had not been raised in Texas. He never had even, I think, come to Texas before he designed the building.
Oh, wow.
But once he got here, he was like, "This place is okay. I'm going to stay," and he ultimately settles in Dallas.
Wow.
So yeah, and a few, I think, like we know of six of his buildings that are still
Okay.
standing.
Wow.
So yeah, so he's still around. Not this one,
Six,
unfortunately.
right? Six buildings in the US or six buildings in Texas?
Six Texas buildings. Yeah.
Okay. Drive around and find
I
it.
mean, most of them are in Dallas, so like, but
No, I'm kidding. I'll drive to Dallas for history. Cool.
yeah,
Whatever.
of course. Maybe not anything else, but history will make an exception.
As long as
Yeah, we're just kidding. We love you, Dallas folks. But we also love to pick on you. Oh, and this is my opportunity to say that Dallas did not get a branch for African Americans in their library till 1933. So, like, what are you doing? Come
right.
on. Um,
Right.
we were over here in 1912. Like, what's up?
Um,
Um,
that's like 20 years after us. Like,
right? Like, come on, do your
that's
thing.
right. But no, okay,
Um,
we're done
yeah,
Dallas. That
that
was
was
it. That was it.
it. That was it. I mean, they had Marshall like right there, and again, like they have a Carnegie Library at Wiley, so like it's in the neighborhood, you know. Like they didn't have to travel too far. Um, so yeah, so this library opens. They hire a lady named Bessie Osborne as the librarian, and she is a teacher in the third ward when she's
Okay.
hired. This is 1912, and they send her. Julia Idison like offers and makes connections with this guy named Thomas Blue, who is the head librarian of Lexington, Louisville, Kentucky's colored branch. So he essentially like brings in these librarians to train them to work in libraries, and that's like Julia Idison makes the connections and like essentially like sends her to librarian training because it did not
Right.
exist back then. I don't even think there was a degree in library science back then. So she's this teacher, she goes off, and here's where things get slightly messy. Um, it appears that when Smith and the trustees and Idison like originally made this plan,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like they, by they I mean like the Carnegie, the Colored Carnegie Library was operating as a branch
Okay.
of the White Carnegie Library.
Yes, 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 yes.
But they had their own trustees,
Okay.
and they had a high degree of like independence.
Like separate
Okay. Yeah.
from the
So
library.
they're like separate. They're really separate. Whereas like now the White Library had no other branches, okay, at this time. So it's not like there's this system and they fold right into the system. Like these people have only had a library for like 8 years. So who knows how to run it, right? So it feels like in like 1909 when they're starting to have these conversations about like what would it look like if we were to open this branch library, it really feels like a branch.
Right.
Okay. And there's this 1913 letter in the archives where it's this really quick letter from Julia Idison to E.O. Smith. And she's like, it's kind of a breakup letter, but I didn't get to hear the fight. Okay. Because she's like, here's a check. So like we're splitting accounts. Here's a check. Seems like you left this here. And you shouldn't consider yourself a branch of us because it appears that we're not.
So,
So
so was she upset that they were seeming to run on their own versus being a branch of the library?
I
And so she was just like, I want to
don't.
be on, go be on your own.
Yeah, it felt like maybe they wanted like to. Hey, I need you. Sorry, my son came in.
Oh, you're fine.
Um, it seems like they wanted to be a little too independent, or they didn't understand what um they didn't understand what the the relationship was going to be like, I guess. And they had different ideas, so they were like, "We're just gonna, you're independent now. Go be independent."
We could take a quick break. What is your son's name?
Thomas, this is Thomas.
Hello, Thomas. My son's not with me today, but if Thomas, you can attend to Thomas. Thomas, you want to
Okay,
history?
can you say that again? You broke
I
up.
was saying, Thomas, did you have any history that you like to share?
Thomas, do you
He's
have
like,
history?
I just wants to hide behind my mommy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me turn off my camera and mic, and I'll entertain,
Oh,
talk amongst yourselves.
yes,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
then you're back on. Let me
Yeah.
know. Or I
Okay.
guess
Sounds
I'll.
good.
Okay. So, guys, we're here with taking a quick intermission. Mommy's be mommying. You know, I'm a mother myself. Thankfully, today's President's Day, and he's hanging out with his dad. But yeah, we're currently talking about the Colored Carnegie Library, located, or what used to be located in Freemanstown. If you are familiar with Freemanstown in Houston, Texas, it was the first Black settlement in Houston, settled by 1,000 newly freed slaves. They settled along the Buffalo Bayou, and they made history. At the time, about 95% of Black Houston businesses were coming out of Freemanstown. Yesterday, I talked about the history of barbecue because it's Houston rodeo season, and I realized, like, yeah, when barbecue came to Texas, or Houston rather, there were like 6 Black-owned barbecue spots in Fourth Ward, 4 in Fifth Ward, and then 5 downtown. So the ones in Fourth Ward and Fifth Ward were Black owned. So that's like 10 Black owned barbecue spots, and then 5 white owned barbecue spots downtown. But anyways, Alicia's back, done with the random history tidbit. But if you didn't know and you're interested in the Houston rodeo, there's a whole like page dedicated to just Texas barbecue and the history. And as I was researching on Freedmanstown, I found some interesting history, like, oh, this is related to the Houston Rodeo. But anyways, again, we're talking about the Carnegie Library. Next, so the
Sorry.
is not alive anymore. That's why we're talking about it. Somebody said Carnegie Library next photo shoot location. Thank you. There is.
We'll get into it. It's not great. It's not a good look. Let's just put it that way. For my people, okay, it's not a good look for us. We'll get into how it's no longer there. So we left off. They've broken up. It's like it's complicated on Facebook. That's a really dated reference, but so they are still like, I feel like Julia Idison is not mad, okay? Like, she is a huge proponent of library services, like, wherever. She just wants everyone to be at the library, like most librarians, okay? She is really, like, I think it was just nobody understood how it worked, and we were going to make sure that she also, like, loved a bureaucracy. So she was like, I need an org chart. I need to know how things work. Like, I can't be doing this loosey-goosey. We don't know how things work.
Right.
So
right.
I think that's, like, really what happened. But yeah, so she even does, in her, like, archives, in her letters, she even does, like, at the American Library Association, a session on like, how to do Black libraries, like, how to, like, what Houston is doing to help service, like, you know, with library services, the Black community.
Right.
So, like, she is interested. She sends out these questionnaires to, like, 15 different cities, asking them, what do you do?
Wow.
And so that's kind of like, she is educated. She's, like, trying to get information, and she, like, actually learns. They're doing a pretty good job.
Okay.
So anyway, 1913, they go off. The library opens I think it's April 11th, 1913. Library is open. The school kids get the weekend off, or get the day off, to go attend the library dedication, which is really cool. So J.B. Bell, E.O. Smith, all of them are there. This is 1913. They also have, like, a contingency of women, which was really cool. Like, they made sure to have women on the stage. So they have Julia Idison is there.
Okay.
They have Dr. Bell Erskine. I can't remember how to say her name, but she was a Black woman who had a PhD, and that was, like, her in 1913. Insane. I think she had gotten it from Oberlin, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So they, like, made sure to have educated people on stage. They're like, this was their brand, right? And so, yeah, it kind of takes off running. It is, it starts, you know, everyone goes there. People spend time there. It becomes this really important kind of third space. There's a basement in the library, which I know Houston and basements are like, what? We don't have basements. But there is a basement, and it can hold like 220 chairs. And so it gets used for tons of different kinds of meetings. Folks who are like training people how to register people to vote. So you have a lot of, like, you know, voting stuff. You have fraternal meetings going on there. You have graduations. You have, like, any kind of meeting, like ministerial alliances. And so if they're not meeting, like, in a specific church, everyone's meeting at the library.
Wow. In Freedmanstown.
In Freedmanstown, it becomes the third space.
Wow.
Sort of for the Black community. And so, yeah, that's kind of, and then we have to talk, and then we can kind of, in 1921, this is a good stopping point. Houston passes a new library tax. And so part of the stipulation of this tax means that all branches, of which there's only one, all branches come under what is now going to be referred to the Houston Public Library System.
Right, okay.
So originally it was like the Houston Carnegie Library and the Colored Carnegie Library. now it's going to be the Houston Public Library System, and they are actively plotting new branches. So
Okay.
the Heights branch opens later in 1921, and that's like the first, but they're only plotting them, it must be said, in white
Okay.
neighborhoods. Okay. So they're opening branches like nobody's business. It's like franchise season out here. Right now, I think they have like 45 branches or something of Houston Public Library, and like the majority of them are opening during this time.
Yeah. Wow.
So as Houston expands, right, they see less and less people using the central library, and they see more and more people using branches like the Heights or,
Where they're located in station,
yeah,
because they
where they're
okay.
located.
Okay.
We've always loved a suburb,
Yeah.
Houston, so gotta put a library there, I guess.
Okay. Okay. So I have a question because you said that they broke up. So they broke up before the library opened, but she still attended the opening because she still had that. I mean, there was no bad blood. It was just like, this is kind of what I'm forced to do.
Yeah.
It's not me type situation, and I still want us to be friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she was always available for like if Miss Osborne, the librarian
Yeah.
of the color branch, needed anything or needed questions or whatever. Like there's a lot of correspondence back and forth. And none of it seems like who are you? I don't know you. Like get out. Uh it seems like very, very friendly. I think it was just really a like we cannot continue both operating like this. But then they fixed it in 1921 with the library tax. So everything was brought under Julia Idison. The trustees at this point become this like advisory group. They don't have a lot of power. They can't control the money like they used to. So they just kind of become this advisory group, but people are still actively being put on the trustee board up into the 30s. So for instance, a later trustee is J.L. Sweat, who is
Okay.
the father of Heman
Okay.
Sweat. Heman Sweat is, of course, the plaintiff in Sweat versus Painter,
That's
and his
that.
court case
Right.
created Texas Southern
Okay.
University.
Okay.
Another one is I can't. I always get his name wrong. Is Alston, who is um, the editor of the Informer, the
Okay.
paper.
Wow. Okay.
So you have all of these like major, black figures in Houston being on the trustee board, even if they don't like technically it's an advisory board.
Okay. Okay. When did the library so what happened, like what was the closing of it or the deterioration of it? But before we get there, I remember in your presentation, you talked about like the inside of the library, like the lights, and you spoke some to the basement. But could you describe just the library in general? Like, what was it like? Was it just a shanty library, or was it like a state of the art library because it was a Carnegie library, or was it clearly like, oh, this is the white Carnegie library and this is the rundown black library? Or no, they both were stand up libraries. I don't see why they had to
Yeah.
be demolished.
So the library, I think I mentioned before, the white library that we got in 1904, $50,000 Carnegie grant to build that.
Okay.
This library,
Oh,
$15,000.
okay. Okay.
So it wasn't as fancy. The white library had literally like an eagle on a pedestal. It was like nuts. Okay, it was outlandish. It was a little too much in my opinion. But
I mean, you got
it would have been nice to have
yeah, you
it now,
libraries enticing. Get the people to come for the building. And oh my
right?
gosh.
Wow, it's crazy. And you can tell it's small because even then
Right.
Houston's outgrowing it, right? So they only keep it for 15 years and then they build the Julia Addison branch. And that library is not huge if you're not in and so this is the
Okay.
upgrade to the not big library is an upgrade.
Right.
So it's not big. I think it was not big and really fancy. I think they spent too much money on that part.
Okay.
So I think they kind of learned their lesson. this library, like I said, it had like room in the basement for about 220 seats. Upstairs, it had, you walked in, you went up some stairs because, there was basement. So we had to go upstairs. And then um, there was an adult reading room and a children's reading room. And like the desk was kind of in the middle.
Okay.
And there had in the corner, they had some offices for the library staff, the book, like the room where you process the books and fix the books. And then there was like a restroom. It was not huge. Um, it was very much in Sidney Pittman's style. So if you go and like look at his extant buildings, it is very much in kind of the same buildings. And if you look in other churches or other establishments that were built in Freedmanstown about that time, it kind of has the same. It kind of
Okay.
has the same look. So, like Bethel Church in it, like the brick is the same as that. And I think that church was built around the same time. So it has like a similar look and
Okay.
feel to Bethel. Which, by the way, if you have not been, 10 out of 10, there's no
Yeah.
roof. It's amazing. Yeah.
Right.
So, so that one's it's there's this lady who was describing it going there as a child, and she said, I was so impressed because you had to go up to get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's this almost like elevation into learning.
Yeah.
I think that was very intentional. There's beautiful brickwork detail on the front of it,
Mhm.
and but inside, it's a library.
Okay.
It has to be functional. They were very big because I think they had learned their lesson from the white library that it was beautiful but not as functional. This one, they were like, it has to be super functional, or this is like not going to work.
Cool.
So yeah, so that was kind of the inside. They had an adult reading room, kids reading room. They had, excuse me, they had a whole section for like magazines, newspapers, and all of that. So they actually became, just by virtue of keeping magazines and newspapers, sort of a repository of Black
Wow.
Houston, because they would keep, like if you look up copies of The Informer and Texas Freedman now, a lot of them are stamped with the library stamp because that's where they were kept.
Okay. So
Yeah.
awesome. Um, okay, so back to the demolishing
Yeah.
of, well, so before, when we talk about the demolishing of the building, did it have like, did they close it and demolish it immediately, or was it closed and abandoned and then they were like, okay, we should move this building because nobody's using it?
Yeah, so it's actually fairly interesting. So, um, in and let me go back because there's again like a lot of factors happening in like the 1920s. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of weaving
Yeah.
around. In the 1920s, River Oaks is built,
Okay.
right? And so all of a sudden you have all of these rich white people taking what used to be San Felipe is now Dallas
Yes.
in through Freedmanstown.
Yes.
And they don't really like the view. They're like, I don't want to drive through this Black community to get to work in downtown, right? They're like, I don't even want to see
Right.
it. Didn't we decide separate but equal, right? I don't even want to peruse. So they were all up on
Right.
their BS.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
Starting in the 20s. All right. So they're commuting in and they just don't like what they see. So they actively start to push people towards Fifth Ward and Third Ward, especially Third Ward, because all of these white communities came up around Freedmanstown and they're like, hey, downtown's right there. This is valuable land. We'd like it for ourselves now, right? And so they're actively trying to push folks towards Third Ward. They're actively trying to push.
When,
Go ahead.
let me say, they only want to do this after the freedmen have established the area, because they had no
Damn.
interest in muddy land that was all with diseases and sickness because of just the environment of the area. But now that we've made it all nice, we have paved areas, we have a streetcar going through, we've made all of these institutions for ourselves. We want to
Suddenly it looks good.
retake it, right? Oh, thank you for work. Now we're just gonna overtake it and like never tell your history. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is what happens, right? And so they deplete the area, right? They don't maintain the roads. They don't put good sewage and draining in. And then, and then it runs down, obviously. And they do their whole thing, this urban renewal thing of like, oh, it's going to be slum clearance, right? Now that we've made it a slum, now we can clear it because it's a slum, right? So they're actively like pushing this. And then like, of course, a depression doesn't help, right? Suddenly you have, and depressions and economic instances always hit the poorest people the hardest, right? So you have overcrowding because everyone's got to live together because no one can afford housing. You have folks who are taking second, third jobs to put food on the table, so they don't have time to be at the library like they used to. And so you see, because the population goes down, you see the library circulation go down as well, right? So you kind of start to see it in the 30s, but then really actively in the 40s, as the city is pushing people in the third and fifth wards, you see that library circulation plummet. And do they build new branches in Black communities? No, they do not. They continue building them in white communities. They can find money for that.
Right.
Somehow, when it comes to building a new branch in the Black community, oh, I'm sorry, the funds are all dried up, right? But something that they started to do very early, and by they I mean like the Houston Public Library system, were these like book mobiles. So they would take like a bus and they would do like a sub branch at a school. And that was so they could gauge the need for a larger branch. Okay. And so what they would do is they said, all right, colored library. And they always called it that, by the way. Like even later when they changed the name to sound more PC, in their documents, it's still always the colored Carnegie Library. They say, okay, you can do bookmobiles and sub branches in the Black areas of town. So like they are not taking it upon themselves. It's all run by the colored Carnegie Library. They are doing a sub branch at Emancipation Park. And they do a branch at the elementary school in Fifth Ward. I can't remember what it's called. It's going to get me. So they are running those operations like out of the colored Carnegie Library.
So now we're in 4th, 3rd, and 5th. Main station in 4th.
Yeah. Okay. And so they're having, by the way, immense popularity. So their third, especially their third ward station, like they tell them, you have to stop having events at the room there because we are paying our maintenance people too much money, like to come. You're having too many events. Like we're spending a bunch. So it's immensely popular. There is the need. There is the want. There's not the desire on behalf of the folks providing this institution to meet the demand. And so they see the fourth ward kind of, their eyes are laser focused in the 40s. City officials' eyes laser focused on just like ruining the fourth ward. If they had their wish, like it would all be condos. So they are like, the fourth ward is not long for this world, and therefore the Color Carnegie Library is not long for this world. The original high school, they're moving it out, right? The Sam Houston High School, it's out of there. So they're slowly like moving all of these institutions around, and so they're like, you can tell what's happening, right? In 1953, they desegregate the library system, which, like, to be fair, fairly early, but it's because they see it coming down the pipeline and they've already gotten a few letters like, try us, we will take you to court, right? So it's like, please consider desegregating. We would hate for a court case to happen to make you do it. And the trustees are like, okay. The trustees, like, to their credit, I guess, they were like, sure, we're fine not like having the library be segregated, except for the kids. We're worried about the kids, right? Like, we're okay with the adult rooms being desegregated. We're okay with like events, but what about children's reading hour? What about it?
Wow.
Right? Yeah. So, but eventually, like, to their credit, they do desegregate the library, although they don't tell anyone. Very important.
Okay.
They forget to mention that in their.
Just still thinking, I can't go there because I'm not accepted. And they haven't made this announcement. They're like, oh, well, technically, I mean, you can come. But really, we don't want you to come. So that's why we haven't said anything.
So nobody finds out until like a month later when a TSU student decides to go to the Julia Idison branch to get a library card and expects to be turned down, right? He wants to incite this incident, right? Which is cool because as you remember back, if story A is true about E.O. Smith and a group of educators tried to use the library and were turned down because of their race, I think it's kind of cool that, like, in 1953, this actually does happen where a TSU student is trying to go use the library and is like, bet, turn me down, right? I will start this.
Right.
Like, we will go lunch counter here. Like, let's do a protest. And right.
Telling us what would happen.
And he is just kind of flabbergasted when they actually give him a card.
Wow.
He's just like, oh,
okay.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Stand down, y'all. Stand down.
Right. So they give him a card, and then he's like, I guess the library's desegregated now. Let's go get library cards. And so they do, like, TSU students. It's a lot of TSU students, obviously, because college kids, library, match made in heaven, right. Before the internet. So, so now that the library's desegregated, we've had a falling like circulation rate since the 40s for the colored Carnegie Library. They rebranded to the Frederick Street branch because it was on Frederick Street. But they have falling branch numbers. I wonder why. Maybe it's because you're trying to ruin our neighborhood.
Right.
And then in 1955, I-45 is built in the middle of Freedmanstown. Yeah. And everything to the east of I-45 is essentially like usurped to become the downtown district. So like the only thing still standing of Freedmanstown is Antioch. Yeah. And Antioch, by the way, if you're like, where in this is my brain? Antioch is catty corner across the street and up one building to the colored Carnegie Library. So that's like in your brain. It's, if you're standing outside of Antioch, it's like over there was the library. And so they're like, so you see that freeway we built? We have to build an on-ramp. And you notice on that freeway, there is not one exit in Freedmanstown. It's either to the north or to the south. Like there's not one. It is a Berlin Wall through Freedmanstown. Like, you are not getting past it. And it's also extremely unwalkable, obviously, because it's Houston. But like, they were going to tell you, you're not having this anymore. Yeah. They took homes, they took businesses, they took the library. That one I'm particularly salty about, obviously. But they did not take Antioch. Yeah. They did not take Antioch.
One thing that I recently saw is that they also took, at the time, one of the biggest baseball venues. It was called West End Park, and it was near the colored Carnegie Library. And I was just like,
on top of 45. 45 was built on top of it. So if you look on the map, there's this little weird triangle park underneath I-45, and that's the only remnant of West End Park.
Wow.
So yeah, that used to be like the baseball site
And,
in town.
and I've never heard of West End Park until recent. I'm like, West End Park. I mean, to be honest, I never heard about co-ed Carnegie Library, so you mentioned it last year.
Nothing. Yeah.
But I
In
know
every,
I know
it,
Freeman's. I know, certain institutions, but it kind of sucks. Like, well, just because it was demolished, we're just not going to talk about it. Like, I think that's what we should be talking about the most.
yeah.
But
In every like publication, because they do mention it in like the 1915 Red Book. It gets a whole write up, right? But it's really just like, hey, look at this great thing we created. We did it. Here it is. It's great. And no one ever, I think, did more research into
yeah,
it. And like, especially, there's only been kind of one researcher apart from me who has done any kind of publishing on it. And she really didn't dive to, like, her focus really wasn't the relations that
okay,
were going on. Okay. So she really didn't dive too much into it. And I don't know if she, when she was studying in like the mid 90s, had really the vocabulary or awareness to see like what was happening. She was kind of the opinion, she's like, oh, low circulation. They closed it.
yeah,
The end.
yeah,
You're like, but what went into that low circulation?
yeah. Let's talk about the factors of it all.
Let's talk about, yeah.
Okay.
So the city tells the public library system back in the 50s, back in like 55, hey, we're taking this, by the way. And the library system is like, I think they knew that they weren't going to fight this. They knew it was not going to happen. And so really the only fight between the city and the library is how much they get for the land. So the city makes them this offer. I can't remember what the offer is, but it's essentially like the price of the land. And the library counters back with, yeah, but there's the land. Like, don't get me wrong, that's a fair price for the land. But we have a whole library on top of it.
Yeah.
And so you also have to pay us for that because we're going to have to go and build a new library and it's like annoying, you know. And the city raised their price by $100. And that was what they got. Like
The disrespect.
the disrespect.
This is related to Washington. What are we talking about? Like,
Right. Right. William Sidney Pittman, like, come on, people. Only then, when this library is being built, do you have another Black architect practicing in Houston. William Sidney Pittman had been the last. Okay. So in 1961, they closed the library. They're like, the circulation has dwindled to like a minimum. We need the land. Like, this is happening. We're closing the library. So in 1961, it's closed. And then 1962, it's demolished. But guess what doesn't happen?
what
The
doesn't happen?
road is built. So the road is built, to be fair.
Yeah.
For at least 10 plus years, it is a parking lot. It's a parking lot. They demolished it for a parking lot, you guys.
Oh, disrespectful.
It's so disrespectful. And then there's this 1970s Houston development documentary that they did. They're standing in the parking lot and they're talking about if Antioch Church can survive. Okay, there was a big, they didn't know if Antioch Church was going to stay.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they're talking about this and they're standing in the parking lot and I shook my computer a little bit. I was like, ugh. This used to be something beautiful. Now it's a parking lot. Like literally one guy's station wagon. Like we destroyed the children's fiction section for one guy's station wagon, right? So to their credit, they did build. So they said, okay, well, now we have no services in Black communities. It's the 60s. People probably aren't going to stand for this. And while it is desegregated, like again, there is no local library in a Black community, right?
So they have to go down to or out in the suburbs that you don't live in, and that they don't want you in their suburbs.
Exactly.
So your best go downtown, but then even then, why can't I just go to my library? Like,
Why does the Heights get a library and I don't get a library?
right.
So they build one in the third ward in Sunnyside on Reed Road. If you Google it now, I can't remember the exact address. It's on Reed Road. It is the most boring, basic, dark brown brick, one story, nothing interesting about it. I don't know if that's more modernism or if it was more of
a disrespect.
A disrespect.
A disrespect to us demolishing your building and giving you like this not cool building because you guys think y'all are that awesome.
It's very small. And when I tell you now, it is now a police station.
Wow.
It's a police station now. So the Reed Road Police Station, that is the old library. But
right.
They did build a new library. It's like literally next to it.
Mm-hmm.
In the 90s, they built the library, and it was named after W.L.D. Johnson Jr., who was a library trustee and a longtime educator. So by the 90s, they got like something right. I don't know when the Fifth Ward got their branch.
Did you just say the 90s?
The 90s. Yeah, I was born when they got this right.
That is hilarious.
It was like 95. So finally,
wow.
they fixed something. But yeah, so this is also when research into the library started. So like I said, there was a scholar before me who published 2 papers, one about the beginning of the library, one about the end. I don't like stories that only have a beginning and an end, even though the beginning and the ends are the super interesting part. Yeah. So in my research, I really wanted a spot where we could know all the information. Like I wanted sort of the dictionary, the encyclopedia of the library. Yeah. So that was kind of my goal in my research, is to bring all of that, all the things that were in fragments all over the places, and bring it into one space.
Wow, that's so exciting. Well, I'm in work. I mean, I'm a big champion of this passion project, as you call it. Again, people don't know about the colored Carnegie Library. They don't know about West End Park. And those are just 2 like major institutions or areas. But there were so many businesses, so many buildings on the other side of 45 that we just probably will never know because people don't want to do the research, and it's hard to do the research if you don't have the time. And that was going to be one of my questions to you. Like, when you're going to find this information in the library, like what are you even looking for? Like what is your like keywords, or like, well, I know I need to go look at this to find the information on this. What are you looking for? If we wanted to go to the Idison Library today to just read up more on what you've shared today, what would we go looking for specifically?
So there's it's still kind of all in the archives, and so you would make an appointment with the archivist. Literally anyone could do this. Like, God bless public libraries. It's free. And anyone, you can wander in off the street and do this. It's beautiful. Yeah. If you know where to look, you can do 99% of the research I do for free. So I do a lot of looking in newspapers. I do a lot of the things that generally like aren't published or haven't been published before. It's because I found them in the archives. And I mean, that involves a lot of sitting and reading old people's writing. Right. Like you're just sitting there with a letter that's 100 years old, like holding it in your hand, and you're like, all right, you're reading people's mail. It's great.
Right. And how was that state? Like where did that come from? It's like, once the library was demolished, was there some random person like just gathering these, or like did it come from the colored library itself, like their archives, and now it's in the Idison Library? Or so I think
I think when the color library became a branch, they kind of transferred all of their documents, and nobody keeps a record like a
Yeah.
librarian. Like, do not get it twisted. Do not get beef with the librarian because they keep the receipts. That's their job. And they will be
Right.
cataloged so that they can ruin your day even faster. So since these are library records, it became incredibly easy because the librarians keep the receipts. And so they kept their own receipts, right? So we have the minutes of the trustees of the Color Carnegie Library. They're not great minutes. Some of them are really short. By the time the Houston Public Library becomes a thing and a deal, you have like these bound volumes of their minutes.
Okay.
And so it really is just like lining things up. You know, I feel like that meme of the guy with the
Yeah.
red like dot, and you're lining things up on the board and you're like, oh my God, okay, this makes sense. And over here, and this is why this was passed, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of reading because they have their old speeches and stuff like that. So they will tell the story of how this happened, what was the factors, that kind of thing. So you can kind of sometimes get it through them. But then, of course, they are operating in a place, in a position. What's the story they are wanting told versus what actually happened sometimes.
Right. And that's what I also, they didn't necessarily destroy this information. It was just kind of buried deep in the archives where
It's
they know
very,
people don't read.
yeah. And then so like things about like, and then it's really figuring out how it's talked about. So if you go in the Houston Chronicle and the Post and stuff like that, it's like, where is the library being mentioned and how is it being used? So it'll say like postal workers meeting at the library on Thursday. Okay, we know the postal workers met there, right? Sometimes you'll see a letter in the archives that's like, hey, can our Girl Scout troop use the library? Bam, the library, you know.
Okay.
So it's kind of really putting those together. It's like, how is this library being reported on being used? There are reports in the Chronicle about the library's opening, that kind of thing. So you're putting together all of these pieces to make what you think is a cohesive story. Sometimes it's still just pieces. The middle, especially of the library, like the actual operation, is still a little bit pieces, right? So yeah, my research like isn't finished yet. I need to uncover. I haven't uncovered all the stones.
I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
Last question, because we've been here for
Okay.
all day. Is there anything of like the physical building that still exists today, or
Oh, good
like
question.
somewhere, or out in a museum, or any? I don't know. Like, is
So
there any?
there are reports at the end of the library, at the demolishing of the library, that the Negro Business League is going to, or the Negro Chamber of Commerce is taking the cornerstone. I have contacted them several times and kind of been in communication with them. They seem like they don't know anything about it. They think it may be in their warehouse. And next time I'm there, like they'll promise to let me truck through their warehouse and see if I can find it. If something still exists, it's a cornerstone. It may
Okay.
still be there. It may have been, we don't know.
Wow.
So history, mystery, does anything still exist? We're
And
not sure.
did you see the picture that I posted on my story of the library? So how, like, do we have a lot of pictures
We do.
of the?
Yeah, we have a fair amount of pictures. You can actually tell like when the library is updated. At some point, they paint it like different colors, the trim. So we have a fair amount of photos.
Okay.
Not so many of the inside, but we have a
Oh,
lot of the outside because the Black community talked about it. They saw it as a source of pride. So
right,
they put that picture everywhere they
right.
could because they were like, look at all these great things we're doing in Houston. Look at how we've built this community for ourselves. And so there's lots of pictures out there.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody that has joined this live. I'm so excited that you were able to share this amazing history. Again, the Color Carnegie Library is live. I'm ready to, listen to more or read more on cover things. Yeah, so just keep us involved let the people know where they can follow you, because if you weren't here in the beginning, she works for the Texas Historical Commission. She's, I'm always talking about historical markers. If you see one, get out, read it, get into the history. She like writes
I
those, like she's
do.
posts when I'm just randomly posting a lot of history. I love going on your stories when you're doing that, because I'm like, yes, somebody gets it. Like, I just have to share the history, even if you're not watching. Like,
Absolute history nerds. First of all, I want to say, like, because we haven't mentioned it yet. So we applied. I wrote a huge paper. It's 24 pages long. It's a lot. But it started out as 38. So, like, the fact we got it to 24, pretty good. And we applied for an undertold historical marker. And world announcement, we received the undertold historical marker. So the Carnegie Library story will be getting a historical marker here in the next couple of years. It takes a little bit to actually produce them,
okay.
but it will be out. There will be a dedication. We will party. It will be a thing. So we are going to be receiving a marker. If you want to follow me, I'm at TX Alicia, Alicia, like the hurricane, and the number one. Fun fact, now that I've moved to Austin, saying like the hurricane doesn't ring the same bells as in Houston. It's depressing. But yeah, so you can follow me there. I post a lot of stuff about history, and yeah, so
Do we
do lots of cool, fun stuff. Post a lot of
do
historical
we
markers.
have an idea where this historical marker may be?
Yeah, so it's going to go in Bob Smith Park. And so it's literally on the site where the library once stood, that is now a road. The way the road works, it's like it transitions, it makes this weird triangle, and they put a fountain there and they called it a city
Yeah.
park. And so we're getting the marker in that park. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sounds wonderful. Wonderful. Well, all right. I hope you have a great rest of your President's
You
Day.
too.
Well, he wasn't a president, but he was a president of a sort.
Yeah.
Right. Until next time. Thank
Bye,
you. Talk to you. Bye.
everyone. Thanks.
All right, y'all. Thank you, thank you, thank you for checking in and tuning in to Miss Alicia of the Texas Historical Commission. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out a way to get her to share that history with my audience. I'm so excited that you guys are here. I'm gonna post it on my page now. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please do not hesitate to contact Alicia. She's very knowledgeable, as you saw in the information she was sharing. And as a lover and student of history, I'm just excited that I was able to connect with her. And, we're still in communications today, because, I'd be a little nervous when I saw her. I was like, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. Like, I was in the audience. She was on stage. So I kind of felt like hesitant to go talk to her, but she's so cool. Like, she's very nice, very informative, awesome, smart, all of the great grand things. And I think it's cool that she works for the Texas Historical Commission. But okay, I'm repeating myself. I'm blah 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 at the mouth. We've been here for about an hour. Thank y'all. And I'll see y'all soon. I have an interview coming out with the Alley Theater's David Rainey. And then I have an event this Sunday as well at Pure Noir, the only Black-owned winery downtown. So if you're interested in seeing me, come out. Go like, follow, share, all the great grand things. Again, here I am, blabbered at the mouth. Let me just get off this live. Until next time, y'all. It's your girl, Whitney B, better known as the dopest historian of Dopest history. See y'all later.